My name is Kelly. If you don't know me, very exciting to meet. And there's a ton of new faces on the call today. So exciting to hopefully see you guys again in the fall and continue working with you guys. My name is Kelly. I'm a 2018-2019 fellow here at the DFA National Office. My co-fellow is Irfan, if you've worked with him before. I come from Washington University in St. Louis. I graduated last May, and I studied architecture and computer science there. And I had the great pleasure of being part of DFA there at WashU for pretty much my whole time in undergrad. Everywhere from a team member. We didn't really have team leads at WashU, but a lot of different positions on our executive board, which was really exciting. And now I'm here at DFA National. So then I will let Glory introduce herself, but Glory is a studio lead from RISD Brown, and she's done a great job of, really treating the studio there like her own prototype, and, really thinking about how to improve the DFA members' experience there in her own way, along with her co-lead Bianca. So, go ahead. Anything to add, Glory, about what you like about your studio's expo?
Yeah. Sorry. You did mention before that we do our critiques with MIT, and I think that is a really, I think it's what makes our final crit super unique because, first of all, it's like a larger DFA community that you get to engage with and see, so you're not just getting critiques from your own members and maybe some community partners and mentors, but also a whole other cohort of DFAers that go through the same design process, but they still think about it differently. And so at RISD and Brown, we actually emphasize the research phase a lot, and our members love to dig deep and find, the bottom of the solutions of the issues. But with MIT, they prefer to, pick one specific problem space and move forward and then think of a solution. And then they focus a lot more on validating and prototyping their product. So it's always interesting to see those different perspectives and seeing where we might be lacking, but also where, we might be doing really well in.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys are definitely two very different studios, so I think it's great that you collaborate in the way that you do. Yeah, let's go ahead and jump into your presentation, Glory.
Sure thing. Let me just screen share. Cool.
Perfect.
Right. So yeah, as you all know, I'm the studio lead, co-lead for RISD and Brown, and I'm really just here to share my experiences on what final crits have been for RISD and Brown and MIT, and then, spark some inspiration, hopefully. So first off, this is what the previous year's final crit looked like at RISD. We held it in the RISD Museum Auditorium, and so it's a really nice space. And you can see like the poster sessions. I know one of you were mentioning up earlier that you guys have a similar like poster setup. We have these set up actually like after the presentation, and so our critique is usually 2 hours long from 1 to 3, and then for 30 minutes afterwards we like to have a more intimate conversation where people can actually go up to the team and talk to them about their project, and give them a little bit more like intimate feedback. So some of the previous goals that Bianca and I have had for Final Crit, I think the most important one is getting feedback from people, because the presentation is really to get insight onto what your process has been and where you should move forward with, or whatever other questions that you have for your project. You wouldn't really be presenting for any other reason. And so one of the main goals is facilitating conversation between studios and teams, and also your community partners, external school administration, and other people. Another goal is to make this final critique or final expo, however you call it, a more formal platform for sharing your project. Because a lot of our members do think like, oh, it's just another design project, it's what we're doing in school, but actually you're like volunteering your time to work on this thing and improve the community around you. That's pretty cool, and that's pretty important. And so treating it as something that's a little bit more formal just gives you a little more power, not power, but like validity to like what you're doing. And so part of this goes into developing your pitch skills and then tying into that, allowing your teams to reflect on their work. Because when you're in the design process, in the nitty-gritty of the research and the ideation, and you've done all of your interviews and stuff, it's kind of difficult to take a step back and really look at your project as a whole. And so we like to use Final Crit as a really good opportunity to do that because when you're presenting a year long worth of process in just 5 to 10 minutes, it's a lot that you're cutting down on. But by doing so, you kind of realize the most important parts of why you're doing this project in the first place. And so these are some photos of the Final Crit at MIT that we just had in May. And on the left side, you can see one of our teams specifically had a slide with questions so that our audience can respond to exactly what they wanted to hear, and then just more like research photos that we have. So let's talk about some pitfalls. I think when you're planning such a large event with maybe over 40 people and taking up 2 hours of time, the most important thing, at least for me at RISD and Brown, was time budgeting. You're always going to have some sort of a hiccup regardless of what it is. And what I've found is that a good way to plan is maybe like have everything set up officially, tested out all of the technology, and have it all ready an hour before the actual event. At least in the last year for both the RISD event and also the MIT Final Crit, food was late. And so even like if it's something minor, it still adds up, and it kind of makes you seem less formal than you might want to seem. Another thing that we do have is timekeepers. So we'll have one person hold up a piece of paper that says 5 minutes, and then 3 minutes, and then 1 minute, just so that to give a reminder to your presenters that to make sure that they're on track and that they don't go over time, or if they do, they don't go over time as much as they would have, because every single minute matters, and if every single team goes over by over a minute, that means your whole event is pushed back by 10 minutes, which means all of these other things, your mentors, you are requesting very valuable time from them, and so it's not good for them to have to stay longer at an event or to commit longer than they wanted to have. Right, another pitfall, tying back to mentors, is facilitating meaningful conversation. And so having those mentors and external advisors and basically any other perspectives from non-DFA people, having them present at your event is really important. And so that ties into publicizing and reaching out early. Another thing that I've found somewhat stressful for RISD and Brown is just that our final critique is right around the time of final exams. So we like to treat our last studio day before that as kind of like a preparation day, but also with lots of food and snack so that they feel a little more rewarded and energized to get over this. And then lastly, wouldn't really consider this a pitfall, but something to work on is definitely having more institutional support. At least at RISD and Brown, we used to be in the Brown Architecture Building, but they've had some organizational changes, and we were moved down to a room that did not have the facilities that were suitable for the work that we were doing. And so we've transitioned to the RISD ID department to have our meetings. But we haven't been able to establish like a really strong connection with them yet. And so if we did have institutional support, that means they could also publicize our work. They might also find ways to incorporate what we're doing into maybe coursework, because the teams that we have, they work on projects for an entire year in their extracurricular time. And so by the end of it, they do become experts, and we could, share our research with students that might be working on the same field. All right. So proven practices. This is a photo of feedback sheets that we have, that we like to have at our final crit, and this is in response to the issue of getting really good feedback. It's an alternative to having to like ask your question in front of a large crowd. A lot of people have stage fright about that, and especially when you only have 3 minutes of, you might only have 3 minutes of feedback per project, and maybe 20 people in the crowd have something to say about your project. And so this allows people in the audience to write down what they're thinking in response to your project, and then they can hand it to you later. Or even just put it in a pile anonymously, and then we, studio leads, kind of just sort that out and hand it to the teams later. Another thing that we do have is a midterm crit that happens right around the middle of the semester. It's more of like an informal presentation that's internal, and our teams would present maybe like 3 to 5 minutes of all of the process that they've done and any questions that they have for their team. So one benefit is just summing up what you've done so far, and that allows you to understand your process a lot better, but also practicing presenting for the final critique. And then by having this done kind of midway, it makes the workload a little bit easier at the end because you've already done half of the process. You've created some slides already for your beginning research and ideation phases, and then oftentimes these slides get reused later on. Another thing that we do have is a pitching coach. You can see Kathleen Bellici on the right side of this photo. She's a really great woman. She bakes biscotti. She owns a biscotti business, actually, and she bakes them herself. But in her free time, she also loves to help people speak better and present their ideas in a really clear and concise way. And so you can see in this photo there's a little poster of some guides that she was helping us with for presentations. And like, I'm not a professional pitching coach, even though I can give a presentation, and neither is Bianca. And so having an expert, someone whose field of expertise is in this area, just allows our like team members to look up to someone that has a lot more information to give and is a lot better at doing the presentations and has a lot more information to share. So just a few more proven practices. In reaching out to our mentors, at our previous final crit, I reached out to about 15 different mentors, community partners, and maybe 7 to 10 of them did show up to our final crit. So that's a pretty good turnout, but that just means that, you know, you have to account for people saying no or not, or simply not being available for the day and time. And so what I've done is including team project descriptions in these outreach emails, especially for the people that are really involved in DFA and love to come to Final Crit. For example, we have a DFA alumni named Will Palmer, and in response to some of the team projects that were listed in the email that we're going to present, he actually brought some of his friends that were experts in that field of area. It was like for healthcare. And they came to the Final Crit too, and they were able to give us some really good feedback for our projects. Another thing everyone knows, just like practice, but also start planning early. Generally, at least at RISD and Brown, we start our planning a month before the event happens. At least a month. A month would be like the shortest amount of time that you'd need. We didn't know that booking the space that we'd wanted on the weekend would cost $400. The administration was able to lower that to $200, but it was also something that we weren't expecting to do. And like I said before, having the entire event set up earlier than you think it needs to be will just help make everything be planned smoothly. So this next slide is just like opening it up. So you know that we do joint critiques with different studios. We're lucky that MIT is only an hour of a train ride away, and so it's very easy for us to go to MIT and for MIT to come down to us. It might be harder for some of you guys, but there's a lot of different ways that your expo can be done, and I think like it's better to treat it as more than just a student project because it is more than that. So yeah, that's the end of my presentation.
Cool. Thanks, Glory.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that was awesome. So I do want to open it up to questions, or if you guys want to spend a couple minutes sort of ruminating about what your expo could be, we can do that. So if you have any questions in mind, I'll open it up to you guys for Glory. I can start. Glory, I'm sort of curious about, with this last iteration of the expo. What is one or two things that you are hoping that the studio leads kind of iterate on for the next time?
Yeah, so I forgot to mention earlier, but with the poster sessions that we had at in fall 2018, after the crit was over and most people had gotten their feedback, we were asking our audience whether they felt that the poster was actually helpful. And in our case, since it's not being displayed for a long period of time, these posters were actually just a good identifier for which people were in which team and which project they worked on. So it was more to identify which people to talk to and what to say to them rather than using the poster content as a reference for the project. And so we weren't able to test this at the recent critique with MIT, but I think in the next one at RISD and Brown, we definitely want to have name tags that say your name and also your team name so that when we do have a feedback, like an informal feedback session after the actual presentations, people know who you are, and if they have something to say, they can just say it or talk to you about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Any questions out there for Glory?
I have a question actually.
Yeah.
What would you recommend doing for a very small studio? Ours, we're trying to make it bigger and bring in new faces, but currently it's we really only have one team. How would you recommend um, maximizing the impact of an expo with such a limited scope to expo?
Yeah. Hmm. I might just make it a more intimate conversation, like inviting, like maybe having a 1 hour event where you have some food and snacks and inviting some community partners and also external mentors, people that don't usually see what your project is about, and having a conversation with them. Um, because it is just one team, I think it would make less sense to have, a very formal presentation format for it. Having a more intimate space to talk about the details and discuss your process and what you've learned more in depth would give people a better idea of where you are and also might allow them to give you better feedback.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions? Sweet. Well, let's go ahead and jump into our activity now. I think that's an awesome transition into thinking about how, there's a lot of different ways that you can iterate on your expo. Um, Glory mentioned a couple of great ones, but it looks sort of different for every studio. So we're going to jump into an activity where we can ideate a couple more ideas for everything from a really small change to a really big change that you could make to your expo, or if you're thinking about sort of doing your expo for the first time, that's great as well. But looking at those little pieces that you can start to iterate on to make your expo better for your community partners or for your outside experts, for your faculty mentors, for your teams and your students. So we're going to do that through sort of planning a what if expo. So we're going to start with about, let's say, 5 minutes of individual ideation, where we're going to type out as many ideas as we can of maybe new ideas or existing ideas that you want to sort of tweak about your expo. And those can be ideas about, implementing name tags, or doing that poster session, or maybe it's about implementing some of those feedback cards, and allowing people to give another way of giving feedback other than, shouting it out at the end of the presentation. We're going to do that for about 5 minutes. We're going to share it out as a group. We're going to go through each of those ideas. And then we're going to narrow down to one idea. We're going to pick one idea as a group here in this call and fill out. You guys are going to fill out this table that's below that sort of walks through. It's sort of like planning out that prototype of what the idea is, why it's important, what it looks like, and how you could actually take some steps in the next couple weeks to implement it at your own expo, if your studio chooses to do so. And then we'll wrap it up with some feedback and talking about next steps. So hopefully by the end of it, you'll have some new ideas for things that you could do at your expo, as well as hopefully something that you can take back to the rest of your studio or to your co-studio leads and say, hey, I think we should try this out. Does that sort of make sense? Cool. So like I said, we're going to start with some individual ideation. So I'm going to give you guys 5 minutes. Let's go for a goal of 20 ideas total. So if you are here in the notes doc, feel free to click on my face at the top of the screen where it shows everyone who's in this Google document. That'll take you to where my cursor is, which is in a section of the document called Individual Ideation. I've already pre-populated a couple of them in there for you guys. But think big. This could be anything from, implementing name tags to, what if we got the Obamas to host us at their personal house in Washington, D.C., and that's where we held, Expo. So I'm going to give you guys 5 minutes, and as a group, just fill out as many ideas as possible. I feel like we need some music. That's awesome. You guys are going pretty fast here. All right, 3 more. Oh, you guys are going for extra credit. Cool. Nice. All right, anyone else adding more ideas? I think Glory's wrapping up her thoughts. Nice. Anything else you guys want to add? All right, could I get someone to volunteer to read the first 12?
I'll do it.
Cool.
Okay. First 12 are name tags, doing a poster session, having more food at the events, potluck based, involve high school students or middle schools to expose them to the organization design thinking, community design sesh, pechakuchas, inviting the
Nice.
state house, posting on neighborhood housing indoors, inviting locals, inviting representatives from campuses without DFA yet, on campus outreach in an open space, have a design sprint at the expo, and have a news crew come out and do an article on the expo.
Nice. Who wants to do the last half?
Can do it.
Thank you.
So use a creative medium for presentations such as a short film or interactive display. Get professors to attend the events. Have groups write a rap about their project.
Nice.
Make the expo in a public place or a public walkthrough space. Have professors get students to attend for extra credit. Make it a co-creation session. Put work in a public space like an exhibit. AR or VR with prototypes. Have a speaker panel of DFA, community partners, industry for a poster session. Partner with local design firms and studios and have their staff do speed rounds with members of each team. Invite professors from the College of Design and Architecture, invite IDSA, NAA students, advertise in other colleges, journalism around campus. Get the school mascot to come, host open sessions during the day for kids on campus and in nearby schools.
Nice. Those are all really great ideas. Is anyone confused about or like didn't really understand what any of those ideas were? Need clarification?
What is number 6?
Yeah, Pachakachas. Who wrote Pachakachas? Or
That was
Pechakuchas?
me. Cha-cha is this thing that I learned from my industrial history of industrial design professor, and basically it's a format of presentation that uses slides. I think it's like 20 slides and 20 seconds each. And so it's kind of like a super fast presentation because the time span that, like the amount of time that someone can be engaged in one slide is around maximum 20 seconds. And so they make it, super fast paced, really short presentation so that it's super engaging. And they actually host Pachakacha events all around the world on really interesting topics. And it's just like an educational conversation piece.
Yeah, they're super cool. I remember going to one in St. Louis, and it was awesome. It's some people pronounce it Pechakucha, but I've heard that it's correctly pronounced Pachakacha because it means like chatter in a different language.
I'm not
So it's like
sure of the
I
origin
don't know.
actually, but I think that
That's
might
what
be
I heard.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other clarification for any of these? Nice. Let's see. How do we want to narrow this down? How about we each let's do sort of a dot voting exercise, but in a Google Doc. So how about everyone gets three asterisks, gets 3 stars, and go ahead and just vote for your favorite ones. You could put 3 stars all on one idea, or you can spread them out if you want. But go ahead and put a star next to 3 different ideas to vote for which one you want to build out in the next 10 minutes we have. Nice. Has everyone voted? Anyone else still thinking? Well, it looks like making the expo in a public space and a public walkthrough space is our winner. So we're going to take, let's see, it's 7:42. So we're going to take about the next 10, 15 minutes or so um, and have you guys sort of build out this experience. So does anyone want to be the note taker for the next 10 minutes and sort of help us fill out this table down here?
Yeah, I can do that.
Cool, nice. Alrighty, so let's start out with the expo idea. So what do you guys think is the expo idea? This one is an easier one to answer.
Am I going to just go ahead and type? What was
Yeah,
the
go ahead and
one?
just type it. Anyone else want to like sort of expand on what that idea means for them, whether it's the person that wrote it or not?
Yeah, I can say something.
Cool.
At least well, both RISD and Brown, we have some archways and like tunnely type areas that people are always walking through, and sometimes they'll have acapellas there, but maybe it would be cool to just have like a guerrilla design expo and
Hmm.
take it over for a few hours and just like gather people to talk about design and talk about their projects and have discussions about um, uh, like social innovation and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it also UVM has a lot of open spaces that see a lot of foot traffic, and it can be really hard to get people to come to events to remember, especially if it's not necessarily for a club they know a whole lot about or on a topic that they're particularly interested in. So bringing the expo to them and putting it in their way, I feel like could be a good way to increase the number of participants in the expo.
Nice.
In Seattle, they have the Seattle Design Festival every year, which is located in this big park. And last year, we actually had a group from Design for America do like an installation for their block party. And it was just like out in the park. There were like 40 interactive installations. So like doing something similar to that, bring it beyond the campus to like an outdoor space in the community could be cool.
Yeah, I remember seeing that Instagram. How did you guys get connected with that?
We, I'm not exactly sure. It was last year's leaders. They like got interested and then they just gathered a team. I was a code lead for the project, and then we just like connected with the SDF committee and then started like setting up their like based on their timeline and installation for them.
Yeah,
It was really fun.
that's awesome. How did you feel like you had to sort of like change the message of DFA to fit the audience that was at that installation?
It was a lot more like interactive with the broader community rather than like I think a lot of what we do is narrowing a scope and like figuring out stakeholders for it, and it was just like, oh, anyone passing through the park could come through and interact with this. And so it was pretty different to design for a broader audience, but I think some of the core of our message was pretty similar. The theme of the festival was trust, and we did
Mm.
like kind of like a an identity reflection bridge. So it was still like a very social outreach message.
Yeah, that's awesome.
You said that
Um,
this was at a festival?
Yeah, Seattle Design Festival.
Seattle Design Festival. Wow, cool.
yeah. Yeah, I wonder if there's something similar like that in Providence. I feel like Providence has so many. I mean, maybe it's just, Rhode
Yeah, we
Island.
have
Sorry, what
we
is it?
have
Rhode
Better
Island by
World by
Design. Better
Design,
Word by Design, yeah.
um, which does happen every year, but it's more of like an intro to design. Although I really love that installation idea. I'll propose it to my team for next year.
Yeah, they
Cool.
have, it's actually like the festival is throughout the whole month, but the block party itself is like the kickoff
Oh,
event.
cool.
And so
Okay.
that's like with all the installations, we're actually doing another one. DFA is doing another
Wow.
installation this summer, so if anyone's in Seattle.
Awesome.
Nice. Yeah, we'll have to share it out to our Seattle alumni network.
Yeah.
Sweet. So with this idea of, maybe this looks like an installation, maybe it looks like, going out in the middle of a really open area on campus. Um, for each of your studios, like why would you do this idea? A lot of you voted for it, so like why do you think this would help your studio?
Um, for us at U of O, we have a pretty small studio, so I think it would be pretty helpful in maybe getting the word out there, getting people interested in what we're doing, even just getting people to hear about what we're doing, could sort of get the ball rolling on increasing our membership.
Hmm.
I think awareness beyond just like the campus setting too. For us, we reached a lot of professionals that were really interested in the fact that students were designing something really exciting for the community.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so not only increasing participants at the expo because, you're drawing from a larger audience than your studio, and increasing because you're increasing awareness of DFA that can increase your membership of students, but, community awareness, part of, an essential part of DFA is having people to work with, um, as teams working with the community. So it's hard to do that if people don't know about you for sure. Other things, how else do you think this idea could help your expo or help your studio in general?
I think that if you have it in a more public space, like I guess you'll get that wider scope of people. So, you'll never know what kind of feedback you'll get from them. So, and again, I think if you invite a select group of people, you might get like a more narrow group of responses. But I think even with just random people, you might get something, an insight that you hadn't thought of before.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the designs are only as strong as the people in the room. Just like, if you're hosting a panel and it turns out to be a white manel, aka a man panel, the conversation is only going to be as deep as the diversity of perspectives in the room. Um, so, as designers working within communities, we got to make sure that not only are we working within communities, but we're actually listening to all of the perspectives and getting all of the perspectives in the room. All right. Anything else to add to that box? Cool. So what does this idea look like? I know that we already talked about it some. We said, setting up something outdoors, maybe out in the quad or out in an open area of campus that a lot of people are walking through. And Tareen told us a little bit more about what that installation looked like at UW. What else could this idea look like? Of making the expo more of a public affair.
I really like the idea of something that is eye-catching and will stop
Mm,
you in your tracks and kind of force you to look at it. Um, just because DFA at RISD and Brown is pretty exclusive in that we hold all of our meetings privately in a design building, and our final crit is pretty much like only the people who know about design or are invited usually go to these things. And so it would be a really great way for us to just get the message out to people who don't know what DFA is at all, or maybe like do know but don't ever get to see us interacting with them because we are an exclusive, like team only type of club.
yeah, for sure. What else? Does anyone else sort of envision where this could happen on campus or off campus? Is there a specific place on campus that you can describe?
I can. So our visual arts buildings sometimes like project stuff on like the side of their wall of like their
Mm,
building. And I was thinking maybe like a different approach you could take to this expo idea. I thought it'd be kind of cool if maybe earlier, like we kind of thought of this idea before, but like the different teams would be with their community partners and like maybe like you would record the presentations like at the location that the community partners are with. So for example, we have a team that's working with a health clinic in Tijuana. And I think it'd be really cool to do like a presentation slash like critique session like there at the clinic. But with all these teams working in different areas, if there'd be a way to like record all of these like final like critiques happening in different areas and like compiling them into like one video or like, you know, installation that could be projected on the side of like a large wall so people passing by could see people or like, you know, designers and what we're doing in the place that they're actually working with. So that's just like some, you know, rough idea that I was thinking about.
That's so cool. Yeah, no, I think that's great because it sort of combines that idea. I think someone had the idea of, you know, hosting it where you're working, where you're actually doing the work with the community partners. But you know, then that presents the challenge of, well, how do you make everyone aware of what everyone else is doing? How do you have this sort of like culmination moment for your entire studio if everyone is working and presenting in all of these different places? Yeah, that's an awesome idea. Video montage. It's like on The Bachelor where they have, you know, all of the different house parties. Oh gosh, I hate myself. Okay. Um, yeah, anything else to build on that idea? What else could this look like at your studio besides, you know, bachelor parties?
I think that with if you're trying to get people's attention, then it has to be kind of flashy, right? So I guess like the different mediums of presenting, you know,
Hmm.
I guess are more relevant here, like some of the ideas we said before.
I keep thinking back to what the Gorilla Girls have done, just because I went
Hmm.
to one of their talks recently. But maybe if we have 5 teams, so maybe we would have like a week-long campaign where for each week we put up a whole bunch of posters in one specific area that kind of highlights their work, and then that same area would be replaced with the next team's work in like a really different in a really different color, really different aesthetic, and a different setup. But it would be like people would see it and be like, "Whoa, interesting."
Yeah, I love that. Cool. I think we're sort of, as we're sort of brainstorming this, I think we're sort of answering the last two boxes. But does anyone else want to add anything for what this could look like at their own campus or how they could do this in the next couple weeks? I think these ideas of you know, coming up with your own way of making it public and sort of stopping people in their tracks and making it interactive are great. You can also think about the ways that the school is already sort of broadcasting the success of its students, you know, like you guys as DFA studios are doing really incredible interdisciplinary, thought-provoking work, and that's something that administrators really love to see and really love to celebrate on their student about their students. I know at WashU, they near the end of my time there, they started doing displays of some of the communication design students' capstone work. They would just put it up in the main dining hall on campus, and they would sort of frame one student at a time all of their capstone work. And you know, maybe it's worth checking out what are the ways that the school is already celebrating student work, and how could you tap into that? Who can you talk to as a DFA studio to sort of get your foot in the door for those avenues? Yeah. Anything else to add for what you're seeing?
Yeah. Uh, a thought I was having, kind of both for testing and some of the earlier ones, is maybe possibly design thinking just the expo itself, the outside expo, asking students what is most likely to stop them at a table, or conversely, what makes them avoid tables, and including more of the things that are good attractors and trying to remove or mitigate the things that are likely to push people away.
Yeah, I love that. Again, the expo is a prototype in itself. How do you get people to engage with what you're trying to get them to engage with? That's awesome. And I think sort of even on the, you know, that's sort of the external side of that. On the internal side of that, feel free to use your expos as a reflection point for the studio as well, not only for teams to think about the work that they've done on their teams, but I always loved sort of using the expo as a time to present our work as an executive board as well. If the executive board is thinking about the DFA studio as their own DFA project, maybe you guys want to give yourselves 5 minutes at the end to say, hey, this is what we've really been working on for you guys for the past couple months, and this is our plan for the future. Just like I think it was it Noah at UVM, you were talking about how you guys are doing that sort of debrief session and thinking about planning for the future. Use the expos as a time not only to celebrate the teamwork, but also to celebrate the studio lead's work as well and present what your plans are for the studio for the future. Sweet. Well, we're coming up on time here. Any other questions for Glory or for each other as we think about how to celebrate our work at Expos? Sweet. Well, I appreciate you guys. You've been a really incredible participatory group this evening. And hopefully you've left with some, some ideas, whether it's this idea of making your expo more public, or maybe you can take one of these other ideas from this list and see if anyone else is excited about it at your studio. Before we leave, I would absolutely love, this is DFA, we prototype, we get feedback. I would absolutely love your guys' feedback on this group call. So if you go down to the bottom of the document, there's a little feedback session, and it has room for likes, wishes, and wonders. If you're unfamiliar with this form of feedback, you just write something, you just finish the ... You say, I liked yada, yada, yada. I wish yada, yada, yada. So something you wish were different or maybe were changed or were better. And I wonder. So those are more questions that you're leaving this session with. We are, for those of you that have been on some of these calls, you know that we're always sort of changing up what we're talking about. We're changing up how we talk about it, what sort of activities or talks or, sort of the format of these calls. So any feedback that you have, positive or negative, it's all constructive. So we would just love to hear your feedback as we take all of this and pass it off to the new fellows for them to design a whole nother year of group calls in the fall and next spring. So I'll let you guys go. If you could make sure to put down some of your feedback at the end as we close out here, that would be great. I'll stay on the line if you have any other questions for me about this topic or anything else DFA related or not DFA related, whatever. Thank you guys so much. And thank you so much to Glory for being our incredible Expo expert for the night and for sharing all of your lovely feedback.
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, I enjoyed hearing all of the different ideas from you guys. I'm super inspired. Like, I'm not even a studio lead anymore, but I'm handing down these ideas to my next team.
Yeah, that's an important piece of it too. All right, thank y'all. Have a good night. We'll stay on if you need.
Thank you.
Thank you.